The champagne glass didn't just break, it shattered the silence of the entire ballroom. Harrison Cole stood frozen, his hand still gripping the waist of his mistress, Felicity. He had walked into the Sapphire Gala believing he was the king of the world, the man who had discarded his boring ex-wife to climb the corporate ladder. He thought he was there to meet the mysterious owner of the company that made him rich. But when the double doors swung open, the room didn't gasp at a stranger. They gasped at Audrey. She wasn't the broken woman he left behind. And the man holding her arm, he wasn't her new lover. He was the man who could end Harrison's life with a single signature. Harrison Cole was a man who believed his own myth. Standing in his penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, adjusting his silk tie in the mirror, he saw a self-made man. He saw a genius director of operations for Apex Global, a massive conglomerate that seemed to run half the city. He didn't see the truth. He didn't see the quiet, steady support that had held him up for 7 years. That support had a name: Audrey Bennett. For 7 years, Audrey had been the perfect wife. She was soft-spoken, diligent, and thrifty. When Harrison was a nobody, struggling to pay off student loans and working entry-level jobs, Audrey was the one who packed his lunches. She was the one who stayed up late, proofreading his reports. She was the one who smoothed over his temper tantrums when he didn't get a promotion. But as Harrison climbed the ladder, his vision of the future changed, and Audrey, with her thrift store cardigans, her messy bun, and her reluctance to attend flashy parties, no longer fit the picture. "I need someone who matches my ambition, Audrey," Harrison had told her 3 months ago, sliding the divorce papers across their scuffed kitchen table. He didn't even look sad. He looked annoyed that he had to have the conversation at all. "You're just stuck. You're happy being a nobody. I'm going places." Audrey hadn't screamed. She hadn't thrown a vase. She had just looked at him with those calm, hazel eyes, a strange mixture of pity and resignation on her face. "Is this about Felicity?" Audrey asked quietly. Harrison had flinched. He didn't think she knew. Felicity Vance was the new marketing intern at his firm. 23 years old, legs for days, and a hunger for wealth that matched Harrison's ego. "It's not about her," Harrison lied, his voice sharp. "It's about us. We've outgrown each other. I'm going to be a CEO one day. I need a partner who looks the part. You look like a librarian." Audrey signed the papers that night. She took nothing. No alimony, no fight for the apartment. She packed 2 suitcases and left. Harrison celebrated with champagne. He thought he had won. He moved Felicity in the next day. He thought he had trimmed the dead weight. He had no idea that he had just cut the anchor that kept his ship from capsizing. 3 months passed. Harrison's life was a whirlwind of expensive dinners and flashy events, with Felicity draped over his arm. But despite his high salary, money was tighter than he expected. Felicity had expensive taste, designer bags, spa weekends, VIP tables. "Don't worry, babe," Harrison said one evening, tossing an embossed envelope onto the marble coffee table. "This is the big one." Felicity picked up the heavy cream-colored card. "The Sapphire Charity Gala," she read, her eyes lighting up. "Tickets are $5,000 a plate." "Company comped them," Harrison said, pouring himself a scotch. "But that's not the important part. Rumor has it that the owner is finally going to show his face." Apex Global was famous for one thing. No one knew who actually owned it. It was a private holding company, managed by a board of directors. Harrison reported to a VP, who reported to a CEO, who reported to a shadowy board. But the majority shareholder, the true owner, was a ghost. "If I can get 5 minutes with the owner," Harrison said, pacing the room, "I can bypass the CEO. I have ideas, Felicity. Big ideas. If I impress him, I could be running the whole North American division by Christmas." Felicity shrieked and threw her arms around him. "We're going to be so rich. I need a new dress, something custom, something that says, 'Future CEO's wife.'" "Get whatever you want," Harrison said, though he mentally checked his credit limit. It was nearly maxed out. "It doesn't matter," he told himself. "After this gala, I'll be swimming in bonuses." While Harrison and Felicity plotted their ascent across town in a quiet, gated estate that wasn't listed on any public maps, Audrey sat in a sunroom filled with orchids. She wasn't wearing a thrift store cardigan. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than Harrison's car. An older man, with silver hair and a posture of immense authority, walked in. He carried a pot of tea. "Are you sure about this, darling?" the man asked. His voice was gravelly but warm. "You don't have to go. We can just fire him remotely. A memo. Services no longer required." Audrey took a sip of tea. Her eyes were hard. "No, Dad. He humiliated me. He told me I was nothing. He used me for 7 years to build his confidence and then threw me away the second he got a taste of power." Elias Bennett, the unseen billionaire behind Apex Global, sighed. He hated seeing his daughter in pain, but he admired her steel. "He doesn't know?" "He has no idea," Audrey said. "He thinks I'm a poor orphan from Ohio. He never asked about my family, Dad. In 7 years, he never once asked to meet you. He was too busy talking about himself." Elias chuckled darkly. "Then let's introduce ourselves properly, shall we?" The night of the Sapphire Gala was electric. The venue was the Grand Olympian Hotel, the most exclusive spot in the city. Paparazzi lined the red carpet, flashbulbs popping like fireworks. Harrison's black limousine pulled up to the curb. He stepped out, adjusting his tuxedo cuffs. He felt like a god. He turned and offered his hand to Felicity. She emerged wearing a dress that left very little to the imagination, a shimmering red sequin number with a slit up to her hip. It was flashy. It was loud. It screamed, "Look at me!" "Show time," Harrison whispered. They walked the carpet. Harrison waved at cameras that weren't pointing at him, but he didn't care. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of old money and corporate power. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung from the ceiling. Harrison immediately went into networking mode. He grabbed a glass of champagne and scanned the room. "There's the VP of Finance," Harrison muttered. "Come on, Felicity, smile." They worked the room for an hour. Harrison was in his element, boasting about his quarterly numbers, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. But he kept checking his watch. "Where is he?" Harrison hissed to a colleague, a man named Greg. "Where's the owner?" Greg looked nervous. "Word is he's arriving late. Special entrance. But Harrison, have you heard the rumors?" "What rumors?" "They say the owner is bringing his daughter. Apparently she's going to take a seat on the board. She's been living undercover for years to understand the common people." Harrison laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Undercover? Like a spy? Sounds like a fairy tale, Greg. Rich kids don't live like normal people. They don't have the discipline." "I'm just telling you what I heard," Greg said, moving away. Harrison turned to Felicity, sneering. "Did you hear that? Undercover daughter. Probably some spoiled brat who's never worked a day in her life. I bet she walks in here, expecting us all to bow." "I hate girls like that," Felicity said, sipping her drink. "They think they're better than everyone, just because of their daddy's money. Unlike us. We earned this." Harrison kissed her cheek. "Exactly. We're the real power couple here." Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the top of the grand staircase. The music, a live orchestra, swelled and then cut to a dramatic silence. The master of ceremonies stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice boomed, "please welcome the chairman and founder of Apex Global, Mr. Elias Bennett." Harrison squinted. Bennett. Never heard the name. Must be reclusive. "And," the announcer continued, "please welcome his daughter and the newly appointed vice chairwoman of the board." The double doors at the top of the stairs slowly opened. Harrison took a sip of his champagne, bored. He was ready to judge the spoiled brat. A figure stepped out. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet, elegant and regal. It was modest, yet it fit her perfectly, hugging curves Harrison recognized, but had never seen draped in such luxury. Diamonds, real, heavy diamonds, glittered at her throat and ears. Her hair, usually messy, was styled in sleek Hollywood waves. Harrison choked. The champagne went down the wrong pipe. He coughed, hacking loudly, drawing stares from the people around him. "Harrison, stop it! You're embarrassing me!" Felicity hissed, slapping his back. Harrison couldn't breathe. He couldn't speak. He pushed Felicity's hand away and stared, his eyes bulging out of his head. The woman at the top of the stairs looked down at the crowd. Her gaze swept over the hundreds of guests, the bankers, the politicians, the executives. And then her eyes locked onto one spot. She looked right at Harrison, and she smiled. A cold, terrifying smile. It was Audrey. Harrison's brain short-circuited. "It's not her," he told himself frantically. "It's a look-alike, a cousin, a twin I didn't know about." "Who is that?" Felicity asked, squinting. "She looks familiar." Harrison's voice was a strangled squeak. That's my ex-wife." Felicity froze. She turned to look at him, then back at the woman descending the stairs on the arm of the billionaire. Audrey? The librarian? The one who wore socks with sandals? "She didn't wear socks with sandals," Harrison defended instinctively, then shook his head. "This is impossible. Audrey is broke. I saw her bank accounts during the divorce. She had $3,000 to her name." "Maybe she's a gold digger," Felicity whispered viciously. "Maybe she hooked up with that old guy. Look at him. He's ancient. It's disgusting." That explanation made sense to Harrison. Yes, that has to be it. Audrey, unable to make it on her own, had found a sugar daddy, a very rich sugar daddy. The thought made anger boil in his gut. How dare she show up here? How dare she crash his night? Harrison straightened his jacket. "You're right," he said to Felicity. "She's here as his date. She's trying to make me jealous. Watch this." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to put her in her place. She thinks she can waltz in here and intimidate me. I'm the director of operations. She's just a +1. Harrison, fueled by a toxic mix of arrogance and panic, began to push through the crowd. He dragged Felicity with him. They moved toward the center of the floor, where Elias Bennett and Audrey were being greeted by the CEO of the company. The crowd parted for Harrison, mostly because he was shoving people. "Mr. Bennett," Harrison called out, his voice too loud in the polite chatter. Elias Bennett turned. Up close, the man was intimidating. He had eyes like steel traps. Audrey stood next to him. She didn't flinch. She simply held a glass of sparkling water, looking at Harrison as if he were a bug on a windshield. "And who might you be?" Elias asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Harrison Cole," he announced, puffed up, "Director of Operations for the Western Region. I've doubled efficiency in my sector." "Ah," Elias said. "The efficiency expert?" Harrison smirked. He turned his eyes to Audrey. "And I see you've met my ex-wife." He said the word like a slur. "Hello, Audrey. You certainly cleaned up nicely. Who paid for the dress? Or is it a rental?" The circle of people around them went deadly silent. The CEO looked horrified. Audrey didn't blink. "Hello, Harrison. And you brought Felicity. How charming. She's wearing the season's trend, I see. Very bright." Felicity bristled. "Excuse me? This is a designer exclusive." "It's a knockoff, dear," Audrey said calmly. "The stitching on the hem is all wrong. But don't worry. No one is looking at the hem." Felicity gasped. Harrison stepped forward, aggression radiating off him. "Cut the act, Audrey. What are you doing here? Stalking me? Did you find Mr. Bennett on a dating site? You need to leave. This is a business event for professionals, not for escorts." The silence in the room was so heavy, it felt like physical pressure. Elias Bennett let out a laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. "Escort?" Elias turned to the room, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "This man, Harrison Cole, was it? Seems to be under a misunderstanding." Elias placed a protective hand on Audrey's shoulder. "He thinks I am dating this young woman. But I don't date my own blood." Harrison's face went slack. "What?" "Allow me to introduce you properly," Elias said, his voice thundering. "This is Audrey Bennett, my only daughter, the sole heiress to the Apex global fortune, and effective immediately, your boss." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. "Your boss?" Harrison felt the blood drain from his face so fast he nearly fainted. The room, previously filled with the low hum of gossip and clinking crystal, was now deathly silent. Every eye was fixed on the quartet in the center of the ballroom. The billionaire father, the transformed daughter, the arrogant ex-husband, and the mistress shivering in her cheap sequins. Harrison's mind raced, desperate to find a foothold in this sliding reality. His ego, bloated from years of unchecked ambition, refused to accept defeat. Instead, it mutated into indignation. This is a joke," Harrison stammered, his voice rising an octave. He pointed a shaking finger at Audrey. "You? An heiress? That's impossible. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in quirky uptown. We clipped coupons. I drove a 10-year-old sedan for 3 years while you saved up for a vacation." He turned to the crowd, looking for validation. "She's lying. She played me. Who does that? Who hides millions of dollars from their husband?" Audrey took a slow, deliberate step forward. The heels of her shoes clicked against the marble floor, a sound that echoed like a judge's gavel. "I didn't hide the money from my husband, Harrison," she said, her voice smooth and cold as polished glass. "I hid the money from a man I was trying to get to know. I wanted to know if you loved me, or if you loved what I could give you." "I did love you," Harrison shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "I gave you 7 years of my life." "You gave me 7 years of tolerance," Audrey corrected. "You tolerated me while you needed someone to cook your meals and wash your clothes. You tolerated me while you were a junior associate and couldn't afford a maid. But the moment you got your first director title, the moment you got a taste of the high life, I became an accessory you were ashamed to wear." She tilted her head, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Do you remember our 5th anniversary, Harrison?" Harrison blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Our 5th anniversary," she repeated. "I wanted to go to that little Italian place on 4th Street, the one where we had our first date. But you refused. You said, and I quote, 'I can't be seen eating pasta in a hole in the wall. What if a client sees me?'" The crowd murmured. Harrison's face turned a mottled red. "You made us go to a steakhouse where the cheapest entree was $80, Audrey continued, relentless. "You spent the entire dinner checking your phone. And when the bill came, you made a show of paying with your corporate card, loudly telling the waiter to keep the change, while you ignored me." "That's business," Harrison argued weakly. "I was building a future." "No," Elias Bennett interjected. His voice was deep, rumbling through the chest of everyone nearby. You were building an image, and you destroyed a marriage to do it. Elias looked at Harrison with profound disgust. My daughter came to me 7 years ago. She said she had met a young man with potential, a man who was driven. She asked me not to interfere, not to give her a trust fund allowance, because she wanted to build a life with you from the ground up. She wanted the struggle. She wanted the bond that comes from working together. Elias stepped closer, towering over Harrison. I watched from the shadows. I saw her support you. I saw her rewrite your resumes. I saw her comfort you when you were passed over for promotions. And I saw you discard her like a wrapper the moment you thought you found something shinier. Elias's eyes flicked to Felicity. Felicity Vance was trembling. She wasn't stupid. She had latched on to Harrison because she thought he was a rising star, a ticket to the big leagues. But now, looking at the man who owned the entire league and the woman who would inherit it, she realized she was standing next to a sinking ship. I didn't know, Felicity whispered, stepping away from Harrison. Harrison grabbed her arm. Don't you dare walk away. We're in this together. Let go of me, Felicity hissed, yanking her arm back. She looked at Audrey, her eyes wide with panic. Mrs. Bennet. Ms. Bennet. I had no idea. He told me you were horrible. He told me you were lazy and unsupportive. He said the marriage was dead for years. And you believed him because it was convenient, Audrey said, dismissing her with a wave of her hand. You're not a victim here, Felicity. You knew he was married. You saw the ring. You just didn't care. Audrey turned back to Harrison. I gave you every chance, Harrison. Even at the divorce settlement. I asked you, is this what you really want? I gave you an out. If you had shown 1 ounce of kindness, 1 ounce of hesitation, things might be different. But you mocked me. You told me I looked like a librarian. Audrey smiled, a terrifying, beautiful expression. Well, Harrison, this librarian just revoked your library card. You can't do this, Harrison wheezed. My job, my reputation. I'm the best director you have. Are you? Elias asked. Or are you just the loudest? Elias signaled to security. 2 large men in dark suits materialized from the crowd. Escort Mr. Cole and his guest out, Elias ordered. They are ruining the ambience. You can't kick me out, Harrison screamed as a guard grabbed his elbow. I work for Apex. I'm a VIP. Not anymore, Audrey said softly. Check your email, Harrison. Harrison frantically patted his pockets for his phone, but the guard was already dragging him backward. He stumbled, his expensive Italian shoes slipping on the polished floor. Felicity didn't wait to be escorted. She turned and fled toward the exit, leaving Harrison alone in his humiliation. As he was hauled through the double doors, the last thing Harrison saw was Audrey turning her back on him to accept a glass of champagne from her father. The entire room erupting into applause behind her. The morning sun didn't rise so much as it assaulted Harrison Cole. It pierced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown penthouse, burning his retinas before he even opened his eyes. For a few blissful seconds, as he lay in the tangled, high-thread count sheets, his brain was blank. He was just a man waking up in a luxury apartment. Then, the memory of the Sapphire Gala hit him like a physical blow to the gut. The ballroom, the stairs, the dress, Audrey. Harrison sat up, gasping for air, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He looked around the room, expecting to see Felicity. He expected her to be packing, or crying, or perhaps plotting with him on how to spin this disaster. Felicity? He croaked. His throat felt like he had swallowed broken glass. Silence. He swung his legs out of bed and walked into the living room. It was empty. But it wasn't just empty of people. It was devoid of her. The scatter of fashion magazines usually on the coffee table? Gone. Her collection of expensive serums that cluttered the bathroom counter? Gone. He ran to the closet. Her side was bare. The wire hangers jangled emptily. She hadn't just left. She had evacuated. She had scrubbed herself from his life in the middle of the night like a professional cleaner at a crime scene. "That little traitor," Harrison whispered, his hands curling into fists. "She runs at the first sign of trouble." He snatched his phone from the nightstand. The screen was a chaotic mess of notifications. 47 missed calls, 112 text messages. He didn't recognize half the numbers, but the previews told him everything he needed to know. "Is it true about the embezzlement?" "Saw the video." "You're finished, man." "The board is calling an emergency meeting. Where are you?" And then, a single email notification at the very top, marked with the red exclamation point of high priority. It wasn't from HR. It wasn't from the CEO. From A. Bennett, Office of the Chairwoman, subject, termination of access and mandatory review. Harrison felt a cold sweat break out on his back. He didn't open it. He didn't need to read the legalese to know he was in danger. But Harrison Cole was a survivor. He was a shark. He had clawed his way from a cubicle to the C-suite, almost, by being aggressive, by denying reality, until he could reshape it. "They can't fire me," he said aloud to the empty room, his voice shaking but gaining volume. "I know where the bodies are buried. I run the entire Western Logistics Division. If I go down, the Q4 numbers tank. They need me." He rushed to the shower, scrubbing the smell of stale champagne and fear off his skin. He didn't dress in defeat. He dressed for war. He chose his closer suit, a navy bespoke three-piece with a subtle pinstripe. He tied his silk tie with a Windsor knot so tight it was almost choking him. He put on his gold cufflinks. He looked in the mirror. He saw bags under his eyes and a tremor in his jaw, but he forced a smile. It was a rictus of arrogance. "You are Harrison Cole," he told his reflection. "You don't lose to a librarian." The fortress. The drive to Apex Global was a nightmare of stop-and-go traffic, giving Harrison too much time to think. He rehearsed his speech. He would threaten a wrongful termination lawsuit. He would claim Audrey was acting out of personal vindictiveness. He would appeal to the old boys club on the board, men who had cheated on their wives too, men who would sympathize with him over a scorned woman. He pulled his Porsche Panamera into the underground garage. He drove to his reserved spot, number 004, right near the elevator. A traffic cone was sitting in it. Harrison honked his horn, long and aggressive. "Move it!" he screamed at the empty concrete. A parking attendant, a man Harrison had ignored for 5 years, walked over slowly. He held a clipboard. "Space is reserved for executive staff, sir," the attendant said, his face impassive. "I am executive staff," Harrison spat, rolling down the window. "I'm the director of operations." "Not according to the list updated this morning," the man said, tapping his clipboard. "Guest parking is on level B4, $7 an hour." Harrison swore loudly, reversed the car with a screech of tires, and sped down to the lowest, dimmest level of the garage. He parked next to a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like a dying fly. He marched to the elevator bank, swiping his keycard at the turnstile. Beep, beep, red light. Access denied. He swiped again, harder. Beep, beep, access denied. "Machine is broken," Harrison muttered, looking around to see if anyone was watching. The lobby was bustling with the morning rush. People were staring. He saw a group of interns whispering behind their hands. He saw the receptionist pick up her phone, her eyes locked on him. "Mr. Cole." The voice was deep, rumbling like a subterranean train. Harrison turned. Standing there was Arthur, the head of corporate security. Arthur was 6'4", a former linebacker who wore his suit like it was struggling to contain his muscles. Beside him was a younger guard Harrison didn't know. "My card is demagnetized, Arthur," Harrison said, trying to sound bored. "Buzz me in." "Your card has been deactivated, Mr. Cole," Arthur said. He didn't smile, he didn't frown. He was a wall. "I have orders to escort you to the 40th floor immediately. Do not pass go. Do not stop at your office." "This is ridiculous," Harrison laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "I need my laptop. I have files—" "Your laptop has already been seized by IT Forensics," Arthur interrupted. "Step this way, sir, or we can do this the hard way." Harrison looked at the lobby. Everyone had stopped moving. The silence was heavy, suffocating. He realized with a jolt of horror that they were all enjoying this. The receptionist he had yelled at for getting his coffee order wrong. She was smirking. The junior analyst he had publicly humiliated in a meeting last week. He was recording on his phone. Harrison straightened his jacket. "Fine, lead the way. I'll clear this up in 5 minutes." The tribunal. The elevator ride was silent. Harrison could hear his own breathing, ragged and shallow. When the doors opened on the executive floor, the atmosphere was different. It wasn't the chaotic buzz of the lobby. It was the silence of a funeral home. Arthur led him past the glass-walled offices. Harrison glanced at his own office, the corner suite he was so proud of. The blinds were drawn. 2 men in blue latex gloves were inside, placing files into cardboard boxes. "Hey!" Harrison shouted, lunging forward. "That's my personal property." Arthur's hand clamped onto Harrison's shoulder. It felt like a hydraulic press. "Keep moving." They reached the main boardroom. The double mahogany doors were closed. Arthur knocked once, then opened them. The room was vast, dominated by a table long enough to land a plane on. At the far end, framed by the panoramic view of the Seattle skyline, sat the tribunal. There was Preston Shaw, the company's general counsel. They called him the Shark because he never lost, and he never blinked. He was reviewing a thick black binder. There was Marcus Thorne, the CFO, a man who looked at spreadsheets with more affection than he looked at his children. And in the center, in the chairwoman's seat, was Audrey. She wasn't wearing the velvet gown from last night. She was wearing a white power suit, sharp and tailored. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She didn't look like the woman who used to clip coupons at their kitchen table. She looked like a statue made of ice and judgment. There was no chair for Harrison. "You're late," Audrey said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the room with terrifying clarity. "My parking spot was taken," Harrison snapped, trying to regain some ground. "Audrey, look, can we cut the theatrics? I know you're hurt. I know the divorce was messy. But dragging me in here, locking me out, it's unprofessional. It's bad for the stock price." "Please stand at the marker," Preston Shaw said, without looking up. He pointed to a small piece of blue tape on the carpet, about 10 feet from the table. "I will not stand at a marker like a schoolboy," Harrison yelled. "I am a director. I demand to speak to Elias." "My father," Audrey said calmly, "is currently in Tokyo dealing with the PR fallout of your little stunt at the gala. He has given me full authority to handle the disposal." "Disposal?" Harrison bristled. "You can't just fire me, Audrey. I have a contract. I have severance clauses. If you terminate me without cause, you owe me 3 years' salary plus stock options. That's $4 million. Preston Shaw finally looked up. He took off his reading glasses. "Oh, we have cause, Mr. Cole. We have so much cause, we barely know where to start." Harrison scoffed. "Cause? Because I brought a date to a party? That's not a fireable offense." "No." Marcus Thorne, the CFO, chimed in. "But grand larceny is." The air left the room. Harrison felt his knees go weak. Larceny? That's absurd. Preston Shaw slid the heavy black binder across the polished table. It spun and stopped perfectly at the edge, right in front of Harrison. "Open it," Preston commanded. Harrison's hands shook as he opened the cover. Confidential forensic audit. Western Operations Logistics. Target. Harrison Cole. "We started looking into your accounts 3 months ago," Audrey said softly. "Right after you served me the divorce papers. You told me you were leaving me because I wasn't ambitious enough. I wanted to see exactly how ambitious you were." Harrison flipped the page. It was a spreadsheet of his expenses. "Page 4, Marcus Thorne directed. The consulting fees paid to a company called Vance Strategy Group." Harrison froze. "We looked into Vance Strategy Group," Marcus continued. "It's a shell company registered in Nevada. The sole signatory is one Felicity Vance. You've been authorizing monthly payments of $5,000 to your mistress for marketing consultation services that were never rendered." That was legitimate work," Harrison stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead. "She provided insights, cultural trends." "There are no deliverables," Preston interrupted. "No reports, no emails, just invoices approved by you. That's embezzlement, Harrison. That's fraud." Harrison flipped the page frantically. He needed to find an error. He needed a lifeline. "Page 12, Audrey said. Her voice sounded sad now. "This one hurt the most, Harrison." Harrison looked. It was a receipt for a jewelry store. Cartier. Item, diamond tennis bracelet, platinum setting. Cost, $12,500. Expense code, 404. Client relationship, gift. Client listed, Global Shipping Partners. "I called the CEO of Global Shipping this morning," Audrey said. "He never received a bracelet. He did, however, mention that you cancelled your last 3 meetings with him." She stood up. She walked slowly around the table, her heels clicking on the floor. She stopped a few feet from him, crossing her arms. "Do you remember my birthday last year, Harrison?" she asked. Harrison blinked, confused by the pivot. "What?" "My 30th birthday, the big one. I waited up until midnight for you to come home. You walked in at 1 a.m., smelled like scotch, and threw a box of drugstore chocolates on the counter. You said you didn't have time to shop." She pointed at the receipt in the binder. "You bought that bracelet for Felicity 2 days before my birthday, and you made my father's company pay for it." Harrison slammed the binder shut. "Okay, fine. I cut some corners. Everyone does it. It's the cost of doing business. I'll pay it back. Deduct it from my bonus." "There is no bonus," Preston said coldly. "And this isn't about paying it back. This is about prison, Harrison." "Prison?" Harrison squeaked. "We have prepared a file for the district attorney," Preston explained, tapping a manila envelope. "Wire fraud, embezzlement, falsifying corporate records. It carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 to 10 years. Harrison looked at the 3 of them. He looked at the panoramic view of the city he thought he owned. He realized with terrifying clarity that his life was over. He dropped to his knees. It wasn't a calculated move. His legs simply gave out. "Audrey, please," he begged, tears welling in his eyes. He reached out a hand toward her, but stopped short of touching her pristine white suit. "Please, don't send me to jail. I'll do anything. I'll leave town. I'll sign whatever you want. Just for the sake of what we had. 7 years, Audrey. Doesn't that mean anything?" Audrey looked down at him. The man on his knees was pathetic. He was small. He wasn't the titan of industry he pretended to be. He was just a thief in a nice suit. 7 years, Audrey repeated. "Yes, it means something. It means I know exactly who you are. You're a man who only begs when he's caught." She turned to Preston. "I don't want a trial," she said. "It drags the company name through the mud. I don't want the headlines." Harrison exhaled, a sob of relief escaping his lips. "Thank you. Oh God, thank you, Audrey." "Don't thank me yet," she said, her eyes hard. "Here is the deal, Harrison. You will sign a full confession. You will sign a resignation letter, effective immediately. You will agree to a complete liquidation of your assets to repay the stolen funds, your 401k, your stock options, your final paycheck, all of it. You leave this building with nothing but the clothes on your back." "But I'll be destitute," Harrison whispered. "I have rent. I have car payments." "Not my problem," Audrey said. "If you sign, we won't file the police report today. If you try to fight this, if you speak to the press, if you so much as tweet about Apex Global, Preston sends the file to the DA, and you go to a cell where the only suit you wear is orange." She leaned down, her face inches from his. "Do we have a deal?" Harrison looked at the pen Preston held out. He looked at the door. He looked at Audrey, the woman he had discarded, who now held his life in her manicured hand. "I sign," he whispered. The walk of nothing. It took 20 minutes. He signed away his career. He signed away his savings. He signed away his reputation. When it was done, Arthur pulled him to his feet. "Escort him out," Audrey said. She had already turned her chair around to face the window, looking out at the city. She didn't watch him leave. Harrison walked out of the boardroom. The walk back to the elevator felt miles longer than the walk in. "Wait," Harrison said as they reached the elevator. "My office. I have a picture of my mother on my desk. Can I at least get that?" Arthur pressed the down button. "Personal effects have been boxed and will be mailed to your last known address, assuming you still have one." The elevator dinged. They stepped in. They went down, past the 30th floor, past the 20th, down to the lobby. When the doors opened, Harrison braced himself. He kept his head down, staring at his shoes. He could feel the eyes on him. The silence of the lobby returned. Arthur walked him to the revolving glass doors. "Mr. Cole," Arthur said. Harrison paused, half turning. "Hand over the badge," Arthur said, holding out a hand. Harrison unclipped the plastic ID badge from his lapel, the badge that said, "Director." He dropped it into Arthur's palm. "And the watch," Arthur added. Harrison clutched his wrist. "This is mine. It was a gift." "Receipts say it was purchased on the company card last Christmas," Arthur said flatly. "Expense code 303, office supplies. Hand it over." Harrison unclasped the Rolex. He handed it over. "Get out," Arthur said. Harrison stumbled through the revolving doors and out onto the sidewalk. The grey Seattle sky had opened up. It was pouring rain. He stood there, shivering, soaking wet in his three-piece suit. He patted his pockets for his car keys, then remembered his car was likely being towed as he stood there. He reached for his phone to call an Uber, but stopped. He checked his bank app. Balance. $0. Account frozen. Pending legal review. He had no car. He had no money. He had no job. He had no wife. He had no mistress. Harrison Cole looked up at the towering glass skyscraper of Apex Global. High above, on the 40th floor, he imagined Audrey sitting in the chair he had coveted, running the empire he had tried to steal from. He pulled his collar up against the rain and started walking. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay there. Harrison Cole stood on the sidewalk outside the Apex Global headquarters, the glass doors sliding shut behind him with a finality that felt like a prison sentence ending, or perhaps just beginning. He reached into his pocket for his car keys, his fingers brushing against the leather fob of his Porsche Panamera. It was his pride and joy, the symbol that he had made it. But as he rounded the corner to the visitor lot, his heart hammered against his ribs. A bright yellow tow truck was backed up against his car. A man in a grease-stained jumpsuit was already hooking the chains to the undercarriage. "Hey!" Harrison screamed, sprinting across the asphalt. "Hey, get away from my car! That's a $100,000 vehicle!" The driver didn't even look up. He just spit a sunflower seed onto the ground. "Bank order, pal. Missed payments. Plus, I got a flag here saying the lease was under a corporate guarantee that's been revoked." "I can pay," Harrison lied, breathless. "Just give me an hour. I'll go to the bank." The driver chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "Repo order is immediate. You got personal items inside? You got 2 minutes to grab 'em." Harrison scrambled to the door, snatching his sunglasses and a stack of business cards from the center console, cards that were now worthless. As the truck hoisted the Porsche into the air, dragging his status away with a screech of tires, Harrison stood alone in the parking lot. It started to rain. He pulled out his phone to call an Uber, but his screen was flooded with notifications. He clicked on one from a social media platform. It was a video. The Sapphire Gala meltdown. Someone had filmed it. Someone had filmed Audrey's entrance, Elias Bennett's declaration, and Harrison's humiliating ejection. The video already had 4.5 million views. The comments were brutal. "Look at this clown trying to act tough. The ex-wife is a queen. Imagine fumbling the bag this hard. He cheated on an heiress for a knockoff? LOL." Harrison felt bile rise in his throat. He wasn't just unemployed. He was a viral joke. The liquidation of Harrison Cole. The next 3 weeks were a blur of legal torture. Harrison tried to fight. He hired a lawyer, a man named Gavin Trent, who operated out of a strip mall because no reputable firm would take a case against Elias Bennett. "We have a case for wrongful termination," Harrison insisted, pacing around Gavin's small, dusty office. "And emotional distress. They humiliated me publicly." Gavin sighed, rubbing his temples. "Harrison, look at the contract. You signed a morality clause. You also signed a fiduciary responsibility agreement. They have proof of the embezzlement. If we sue them, they will countersue for the stolen $45,000 plus damages. They will bury you." "So I just walk away?" Harrison demanded. "I built that department." "You walk away," Gavin said, "and you pray they don't press criminal charges. My contact at the DA's office says Preston Shaw, Bennett's lawyer, is holding off on filing a police report for fraud only if you disappear quietly. If you make noise, you go to prison." Harrison went quiet. Prison. The reality of it shattered his remaining arrogance. He went home to his penthouse. Or rather, he tried to. The eviction notice was taped to the door. The lease was in his name, but without the Apex salary, he couldn't make the rent. He had 30 days to vacate. He began selling everything. The Rolex watches went first, sold to a pawn shop for a fraction of their value because he needed cash that day. The designer suits, the armor he had worn to feel superior to Audrey, were sold on consignment apps. But the cruelest cut came on a Thursday night. Harrison was sitting on a packing box in his emptying apartment, eating cold takeout noodles, when the TV flickered in the background. It was an entertainment news program. "And up next," the host chirped, "an exclusive interview with the woman caught in the middle of the Billionaire gala drama. Felicity Vance speaks out." Harrison dropped his fork. He scrambled for the remote, turning the volume up. There was Felicity. She was sitting on a beige couch, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She looked younger, more innocent. She was wearing a modest cardigan, ironically, exactly the kind Audrey used to wear. "I had no idea," Felicity sobbed on screen. "Harrison told me he was divorced. He told me his ex-wife was abusive. He manipulated me. I was just a young intern trying to learn the business, and he used his power to groom me. I'm a victim in this too." "You liar!" Harrison screamed at the TV. "You begged me to take you to that gala. You picked out the dress." "I just want to apologize to the Bennett family," TV Felicity continued, looking straight into the camera. "And I've actually started a foundation for women who have been manipulated by corporate predators. It's called the Truth Initiative." Harrison threw the remote at the screen. It cracked the LCD, fracturing Felicity's face into a spiderweb of glitches. She had spun the narrative. She had turned him into the monster to save herself, and the world was eating it up. The long fall 6 months later. The Seattle rain was relentless. Harrison pulled his hood up as he locked his bicycle to the rack outside a trendy coffee shop in the Capitol Hill district. He wasn't driving a Porsche anymore. He wasn't even driving. He had lost his license after a DUI arrest 2 months after the gala, a night where he tried to drown his sorrows in whiskey and drove his rental car into a lamp-post. He walked into the coffee shop, the bell jingling. "You're late, Harry," the manager, a 20-year-old kid named Kevin, snapped. "Traffic was bad," Harrison muttered, tying on his green apron. "Bicycles don't get stuck in traffic. Get on the espresso machine. Morning rush is starting." This was Harrison Cole's life now. No one in the corporate world would touch him. His name was blacklisted across every major industry database. The moment a recruiter Googled him, the viral video and the fraud allegations popped up. He was radioactive. So he made coffee. He spent 8 hours a day serving lattes to the kind of people he used to fire. He watched young executives in sharp suits come in, talking about Q3 projections and mergers, and he wanted to scream. He wanted to grab them by the lapels and tell them he used to be a director. But he knew they wouldn't care. To them, he was just the guy who burned the milk. "Order for Sophie," Harrison called out, sliding a cup onto the counter. "It's about time," the woman snapped, snatching the cup without a thank you. Harrison gritted his teeth. Instant karma, he thought bitterly. "I used to treat servers like dirt. Now I am the dirt." The encounter. It was a Tuesday afternoon, usually a slow time, when the atmosphere in the coffee shop changed. It wasn't a noise, it was a silence. A heavy, respectful silence that rippled from the front door to the back counter. Harrison was wiping down the steam wand. He looked up to see what was happening. 2 large men in suits entered first. Security. Harrison recognized one of them. It was Arthur, the man who had escorted him out of the building. Harrison ducked his head, terrified of being recognized, pulling his cap lower. Then a woman walked in. She was wearing a trench coat that probably cost more than Harrison made in a year. She held a phone to her ear, speaking in rapid, decisive French. She looked radiant, strong. It was Audrey. She wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a man, tall, with kind eyes and a rugged, genuine smile. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a high-end flannel shirt and jeans, looking effortlessly wealthy. He had a hand on the small of Audrey's back, a gesture of protective affection that looked entirely natural. Harrison froze. He felt like a deer in headlights. He wanted to run to the back room, but his feet were lead. "I'll grab the coffees, honey," the man said to Audrey. "You finish the call with the Paris team." Audrey smiled at him, a smile Harrison had never seen. It wasn't the polite, supportive smile she used to give him. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. "Thanks, Liam. An oat milk latte, please." Liam walked up to the register. Kevin, the manager, was practically bowing. "Whatever you need, sir. On the house. No? Okay." Liam paid with a black card. "1 oat milk latte and a black coffee for me." Kevin turned to Harrison. "Harry, 1 oat latte, 1 black coffee. Make it perfect. VIPs." Harrison's hands shook so hard, He nearly dropped the portafilter. He couldn't do this. He couldn't serve her. But if he walked out, he lost this job. And he needed the rent money for his studio apartment, a basement unit with no windows. He made the drinks. He poured the milk out carefully, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He placed the cups on the counter. "Order for..." "Liam," Harrison croaked. His voice was raspy. Liam stepped up. He looked at Harrison. Then he frowned slightly. He didn't recognize him at first. Harrison had lost weight. His face was gaunt, and he had a patchy beard. But then, recognition dawned in Liam's eyes. Liam didn't say anything. He just picked up the cups. But Audrey had finished her call. She walked up to the counter to join Liam. "Ready?" she asked. Then she looked at the barista. Her eyes met Harrison's. Time stopped. Harrison waited for the explosion. He waited for her to mock him. He waited for her to tell the manager who he was, to get him fired, to laugh in his face. He braced himself for the final blow of his punishment. But Audrey didn't laugh. She didn't scream. She simply looked at him. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't even pitying. It was indifferent. She looked at him the way one looks at a stranger or a piece of furniture. He was no longer the villain in her story. He was no longer the source of her pain. He was just a barista in a green apron. He was completely, utterly insignificant to her. "Let's go, Liam," Audrey said, turning her back on him without a second glance. "We don't want to be late for the charity auction." "Coming," Liam said. He paused for a split second, looked at Harrison with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal, and dropped a $5 bill into the tip jar. "Keep the change," Liam said. They walked out into the rain, the bell jingling cheerfully behind them. Harrison stood there, staring at the $5 bill in the jar. That was the worst punishment of all. If she had screamed at him, it would have meant he still mattered. It would have meant he still had power over her emotions. But her indifference proved the truth he had been denying for a year. She hadn't just moved on, she had ascended, and he had been left behind, not because of a conspiracy, but because of his own choices. He had held a diamond in his hand and traded it for a sequin. "Harry!" Kevin yelled from the back. "Table 3 needs wiping. Stop daydreaming." Harrison Cole, the former director of operations, the man who wanted to be king, grabbed a dirty rag and walked out from behind the counter. "Coming," he whispered. He wiped the table, and as he looked out the window, he saw a sleek black town car pull away from the curb, carrying the woman who used to pack his lunch, disappearing into a life he could only imagine. The story of Harrison Cole isn't just a drama, it's a warning. It reminds us that when we trade loyalty for ambition, we often end up with neither. Harrison thought his value came from his job title and the woman on his arm, but he failed to realize that his true wealth was the supportive partner waiting at home. In the end, Harrison got exactly what he asked for, a life where everyone knew his name. But instead of cheering, they were laughing. And Audrey, she proved that the best revenge isn't screaming or fighting. The best revenge is happiness. The best revenge is thriving so completely that the person who hurt you becomes a stranger you simply don't recognize anymore. What would you have done if you were Audrey? Would you have confronted him one last time, or was her silence the ultimate power move? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and betrayal, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.